All right, I think we are at critical mass. Welcome, everybody, to this morning's press conference, where we're going to hear from a number of folks, including Mayor Durkin, about the path forward for the West Seattle high-rise bridge. Just a quick reminder for folks about some rules for the road as we move into this press conference today. We are going to be using live closed captioning and translation in Spanish. So that is available to people who are on Zoom. We will, in addition, be taking that closed captioning and translating into additional languages. So this press conference will be as accessible as possible to as many Seattleites as possible. And we will speak clearly and slowly to the extent possible so that live translation can be as clear and accessible as it can be. A reminder for everyone to please use your Zoom etiquette, keeping yourself on mute and your video off if you aren't speaking or aren't slated to be speaking. We'll be hearing today from all of our guests, and then we will move into Q&A. We will utilize the digital hand-raising function, but for those who are not able to come off of mute or having technical difficulties with their audio, you're welcome to use the chat function, and I will relay your questions to our guests in that way. And with that, I will now turn it over to our mayor, Mayor Jenny Durkin. Thank you so much for being here this morning.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you to everyone else who's joined. Thank you to all the speakers. I won't name each of them because we want to get going. In any other year, and frankly, over the last 2 decades, probably if the West Seattle Bridge had closed and we've been going through this process, that would have dominated the news. It would have been the #1 news story for the region. But unfortunately, 2020 had different plans for us. On February 29th, 2020, we had our first case of COVID-19 in King County. It was a few weeks later that during inspections of the bridge that engineers working for the Seattle Department of Transportation noticed there was accelerated cracking. Sam Zimbabwe, the director of the Seattle Department of Transportation, called me and said we needed to urgently close the bridge. It was the right thing to do, and I want to thank Sam and his team for their rapid response to that in the middle of, if people can remember, was just a very difficult few weeks at the beginning of the pandemic, and it's been difficult since then, but that was a time of heightened difficulties. It was yet another challenge that our city faced during this very hard year. I want to acknowledge the community of West Seattle, South Park, Delridge, Georgetown, and all the communities that have been directly impacted by the closure of this bridge. While it is important to the whole region, it has been particularly difficult on them. And if we could wave a magic wand to restore mobility and have a new bridge, we would do it. Unfortunately, that's not in our capability. Since the closure of the West Seattle High Bridge, we've been focused on conducting repairs to stabilize the bridge, in addition to advancing all efforts to determine whether we could repair or replace it. And Sam's team has been working under a lot of pressure because we insisted on 2 things: that we not lose any time, and that we make sure that we preserve both options, repair or replace, as we went through this. We've worked urgently also to mitigate the traffic and environmental impacts that this closure has had. We know it's still incredibly difficult for the communities, and that even with those mitigations, it's hard. But we have been trying and will continue to work with the communities to mitigate against those impacts. As we close the bridge, we shared that the stabilization work, the first phase of this, would take until the first part of 2021. The good news is we're on track for that. We have lost no time in the stabilization as we've gone through this process to evaluate the options for replacement or repairing the bridge, getting community input, and working with the technical experts as well as the task force. After weekly briefings in the last 8 months and dozens of town halls, meetings, conversations with small businesses and local leaders, engineers, and community, and having appeared and talked to members of the task force, and having read all of their comments on what we should do, I've made the decision that we will move forward in repairing the bridge. We will get the stabilization repairs as quickly as we can. As we narrowed the half-dozen options in recent months to these 2 key options, repair or replacement of the midspan, I saw the benefits and risks of both. I will tell you, I went into this process with a bias of replacement, And full replacement, as we know, was eliminated as an option because it simply took too long and cost too much. When making the decision between the repair option and the replacement of the midspan, I weighed a number of really key principles. The first, of course, was safety. I made it clear, and Sam made it clear to me, that we could only consider the path forward that our engineers and our technical advisors assured us would be technically feasible and safe for the traveling public. We also looked at the speed to restore mobility. It has been a priority from day one to restore mobility in this corridor. It is the workhorse of Seattle. It carries over 100,000 trips a day in usual circumstances. It is a key corridor for freight for the port, which is one of the economic drivers, not just of Seattle, but of our whole region. We also needed certainty. And while I will talk about in a minute, each of the options has risk. We wanted to make sure that looking at the options, we used the lens to determine what had the greatest amount of certainty to restore mobility in a reasonable time frame at a cost where funding was obtainable. We also looked at the impacts on the communities, both on how long the bridge was out, how long it took to replace it, and what that looked like in replacing. We know that we wanted to minimize the impacts on the Duwamish Valley and West Seattle, as well as the adjoining neighborhoods and communities and the port. Jobs and economic recovery are critical to our city. COVID-19 has just taken an incredible hit on our small businesses and our workers. And while we're fortunate to have sectors of the economy that have been able to continue, like our construction industry and our tech industry, the port jobs are critical, not just for today, but for the future of our recovery. I'm very focused on building our city back, not to where it was before, but to be better and more equitable. This corridor has a strong and significant impact on the jobs and the workers at the Port of Seattle. Not just today, but what we have planned for the future. Terminal 5 will be an incredible, important economic driver for our city and for our region. I had contacts with and worked with the port and SSA who leased that. We were at risk for losing those jobs and the improvement of the port if we cannot restore mobility. I also looked and relied heavily on community input and the input of our technical advisors. After a dozen of town halls and listening to people, talking to the task force, conversations with local officials, it was clear to me that there was pros and cons on each of the options. And not surprising for Seattle, people were pretty much split down the middle. But the factors that I just viewed were the factors that everyone seemed to be focused on, as well as how do we make sure that we are looking to the future, not just restoring the mobility of today, but how do we look to the future and make sure that we're looking at mobility for the future that is climate friendly and better. Moving forward with repair. So given those factors, I made the decision that we'll move forward with repairing the high-rise bridge. Work has already begun. That's the important thing people to know. The work we have been doing to shore up the bridge is the path to repair. And we anticipate that we will be able to restore live load by mid-2022. Over this year, we've been stabilizing the bridge. SDOT looked at a series of options. And that was everything from a submersible tunnel to full replacement, to just shoring up the bridge, to repairing the bridge. As I said, full replacement was eliminated because it's just too costly and takes too long. And it did not move us to a place where we could reduce car traffic. 10, 15, and 20 years from now, we should be a city that is not reliant on vehicles and cars. We need to be moving to a more climate-friendly options. That left us two options, repair or the replacement option, sometimes dubbed the rapid repair because it was rapid replacement because it was rapid compared to full replacement. But it only replaced the midspan. I will tell you that I want to thank Sam and his team because as we eliminated the replacement option, we talked a lot about coming up with options for a quicker replacement scenario. And Sam and his team looked across the United States to Asia to Europe to see examples there. And when we found that rapid replacement or the replacement of the midspan, I was very intrigued. I thought maybe we had found it. It was in many ways on paper exactly what we were looking for. It was a longer period of time, 2 years for repair versus 3 years for replacement. But it has some significant hurdles that at the end of the day made me the decision that we would do repair. Because of the tight timeline that SDOT brought to me, which I asked them to do, a very aggressive schedule, we could not afford any significant delays, hurdles, or challenges, or it would move that time frame for replacement forward maybe significantly. And this include obtaining the financing, finishing permitting, finishing consultations with the tribes, making sure that we get the financing from the federal government, and was clear that we could not begin demolishing the bridge till we had certainty that we would have the financing for this much more expensive option. That's a commitment I had to make to the people of Seattle. And after looking at that timeline and exploring what a realistic timeframe for both financing and permitting and the environmental reviews, it was clear that I could not look the voters and people in Seattle in the eye and say we'd be back on that bridge in 3 years. And then all likelihood, it would be longer than that. And a cost of $400 to $600 million, I knew that the federal financing would be difficult to obtain. We've had many conversations with our delegation. I want to really emphasize they've been extremely supportive, and I know they'll go to work for the city of Seattle, as will members of our state delegation. But in conversations, we had hoped that we would have a federal infrastructure bill this year, and that we could put this replacement of the West Seattle Bridge in the queue for that. It didn't happen for all the reasons we've seen in Washington, D.C. and its dysfunction. But in conversations I've had, including speaking with the chair of the House Committee on Transportation and Housing, it is anticipated that they won't take up an infrastructure bill until sometime next year and might not complete it until late next year. That would push our very aggressive schedule by a significant period of time, because again, in order for this to work, we had to get permitting, financing before we started demolition. And once we started demolition, have a very rapid schedule in which we could also at the side be creating the structure. Our experience in other projects in Seattle also told us that the permitting and environmental review schedule that we had laid for was very aggressive. It required that just in 12 months, by the end of next year, we'd be done with all of that environmental permitting and our consultations. And we know that many of those decisions are outside our control. And looking at other projects, there are many that have taken longer. There are some that have met that time schedule, but the risk was too great. This corridor is just too critical to let the schedule slip by months, let alone years. We know that repair will get us reconnected the fastest. But I also know that we have to plan for redundancies and the future. The greatest risk with the repair scenario is that we don't know how it will operate under load conditions. So Seattle Department of Transportation will continue with studying a replacement for this bridge. Our engineers have said that this will last between 15 and 40 years, including our outside experts. We also know that we have to look at that type, size, and location study, because we will have to replace this bridge at some point. We also know that Sound Transit will be building a bridge in this corridor in the coming years, later this decade. I think it's time to start a conversation with Sound Transit on whether that bridge can do more than just carry light rail. As we look into the future, we know that we as a region will continue to grow. Our jobs will grow at the port, West Seattle will grow, and we have to be looking at infrastructure that will carry us into the future. I want to again acknowledge the residents of West Seattle whose patience and really impacts of this situation has been a difficult situation. And they have really been amazing in the way that they have persisted. I know it is wearing thin, and I know even 2 years in horizon to get back on that bridge seems like a lifetime. We will do everything we can to accelerate and do this in a way as long as it's safe and meets the other criteria. I also have to thank, and you're going to be hearing from our incredible co-chairs of the West Seattle Community Task Force, former Mayor Greg Nichols and Paulina Lopez, and the task force itself. This was not a panel that people just signed up for and could put it on a resume somewhere. They went to work. We had multiple meetings. They were briefed by the experts. They gave excellent questions. They asked me questions in multiple meetings I had with them. And then they each gave me their thoughtful input on how they viewed the various factors. I want to thank them because it really did provide not just me, but the Seattle Department of Transportation with really needed input. And it required us to be smarter and better because those questions came, they were thoughtful. I also want to thank the Seattle Department of Transportation. The work they did to discover this in the middle of a COVID crisis and to continue day after day preserving all the options while making sure we did all we could to stabilize the bridge and do the engineering and have the task force and meet with our very important other elected leaders and stakeholders. Really particular thanks go to Sam Zimbabwe, Heather Marks, and Matt Donahue. Without them, we would not be where we are today. I also want to thank all of the elected leaders who have given me advice and input, who've helped us with the federal government and the state government. We're going to continue to need you as we move forward. And I'd now like to turn it over to Councilmember Herbold. And everyone in West Seattle should know they have a very strong advocate in Councilmember Herbold. And I'll turn it over to her now.
Thank you so much, Mayor. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today. So I just want to start out by saying I believe that the mayor's decision to choose the repair pathway for the West Seattle Bridge has been thorough, thoughtful, and inclusive of a diversity of perspectives, as well as the input of SDOT's independent technical advisory panel. I really appreciate that the mayor critically examined the promise of the late-breaking rapid replacement option to determine whether or not the best-case scenario timeline was realistic. I agree, repairing the bridge is the best approach to restore safe access as quickly as possible. Since the closure of the West Seattle Bridge on March 23rd, I've heard every day from residents and businesses that are hurting, their lives and businesses disrupted. I've heard consistently from D1 constituents that restoring safe access as quickly as possible is the highest priority. As social distancing decreases, traffic and access issues will only increase. 2 years for a repair is shorter than other alternatives, even in the best case scenario. Moreover, I have found the technical advisory panel's confidence that a repair will last 30 to 40 years compelling. I also really appreciate the mayor's approach towards working with Sound Transit about potential joint use for a future bridge. In addition, proceeding now with a study for replacement as the Seattle Department of Transportation monitors the effectiveness of stabilization measures after weather changes that preserves our options should we need to change course. The council has acted quickly to provide $70 million in loan funding for the West Seattle and SDOT's Reconnect West Seattle program to both stabilize the bridge and mitigate the impacts of bridge tour routes through communities that have experienced generations of underinvestment. We are poised to authorize $100 million in debt in the 2021 budget, with $50 million in bonds listed in the city's capital improvement program for 2022. Business and workforce impacts resulting from the bridge closure are key concerns for West Seattle. But it's also important for our West Seattle businesses, especially our small businesses, but also our regional economy due to reduced trips on and off of the peninsula. I've learned that closure impacts access to jobs and to supply chains, and that disproportionately harms smaller businesses. I want to extend my thanks as well to SDOT, particularly Director Zimbabwe and Heather Marks, the Community Task Force co-chairs, Mayor Greg Nichols and Paulina Lopez, as well as all the members of the task force. Together, you've led us to this critical decision for all of District 1, the surrounding neighborhoods of Soto and Georgetown, and the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Herbold. We will now turn to Councilmember Peterson.
Thank you and good morning. After consulting technical experts, Seattle residents, local businesses, and the Port of Seattle, I want to thank our mayor for her careful and thorough consideration of how best to move forward safely and effectively so we can quickly restore this vital infrastructure. After studying the various choices, I agree with Mayor Durkin that immediate repair of the bridge is the best option so we can quickly and safely restore mobility to our region's bridge network. Repairing the bridge now still keeps open the long-term solution to plan and fund a methodical replacement in the future and to coordinate with increased transit options. I believe the cracking and closure of the West Seattle Bridge must be a wake-up call to take better care of all of our bridges with more investment and maintenance to keep transit and freight moving throughout a city defined by its waterways and ravines. After being appointed to chair our city's transportation committee earlier this year, I remain committed to work with Mayor Durkin, our Seattle Department of Transportation, our Port of Seattle, and the rest of the city council and residents to make sure we honor this commitment to our bridge infrastructure and get this done. The views of the Port of Seattle were very important in this decision, and now we will hear from the President of the Port Commission, Peter Steinberg. Thank you.
Commissioner Steinberg, you're on mute. Let me see if I can unmute.
There, I think I got it.
You got it.
Buenos
Wonderful.
dias. Good morning. This is a great day for Seattle, for the region. Thank you so much, Mayor Durkin, for your decisive leadership as we witness here today, and to all of the task force members, the outstanding co-chairs. I think you led us through this challenging, to say the least, community and stakeholder engagement process with incredible adeptitude and leadership. And I think we've demonstrated here that this is not the protracted Seattle process as usual, thanks to all the decisive leadership of everyone involved here, starting with the mayor. I've prepared on behalf of myself and the Port of Tacoma Commission President John McCarthy a position statement here in strong support of the mayor's decision. We are the co-chairs of the Northwest Seaport Alliance, and we have full alignment with the mayor's position at this time. We appreciate her leadership in creating the community task force, her thoughtful and timely decision moving forward with repairing the West Seattle High Bridge. We are especially grateful. I'm going to slow down for the translator, my apologies. We are especially grateful for her strong acknowledgement of the importance of considering the Northwest Seaport Alliance's marine cargo business, especially with respect to Terminal 5, as this is our lifeline to continuing operations and the thousands of jobs that are represented there and businesses. We look forward to engaging with our city partners, stakeholders, SDOT, and around the long-term type, size, and location study. Someone will have to define that better than I can. That is now underway. Connected to that work, we expect that the city will minimize any risk of future unplanned closure and will be coordinated closely with Sound Transit as they move ahead with their own planned Duwamish crossing. We commend the tireless work of the SDOT team and recognize how much they have invested to bring this project to this point. Like so many others, the safe and rapid restoration of vehicle capacity and traffic mobility to the High Bridge is the highest priority for us. The congestion on both the Lower Swing Bridge and West Marginal Way is of great concern as we make final preparations to to turn over Terminal 5 to our tenant next year under a 30-year lease. Maintaining economic and industrial diversity and living wage jobs base are crucial to building an equitable recovery. As this proceeds, we appreciate the city will continue to prioritize freight access to Terminal 5 via the lower swing bridge to support successful operations while also mitigating traffic impacts through the West Marginal Way freight corridor. Once again, thank you, Mayor Durkin, City Council members, especially Herbold and Peterson, for your outstanding leadership and the many good people who have participated in this effort. It may not satisfy all, but I'm convinced myself that this is the right thing to be doing at the right time, decisively and quickly. And so we can all breathe a great sigh of relief today that we are moving forward swiftly with the plan to restore capacity quickly and reliably. Once again, thank you all.
Thank you, Commissioner Steinberg. We are now going to turn it over to SDOT Director Sam Zimbabwe.
Good morning, all. I want to start by thanking Mayor Durkin for her continued leadership and support throughout all of the work it has taken to get us here today. I want to thank Councilmembers Peterson and Herbold for being such steadfast partners, helping us to secure the resources needed to immediately begin the stabilization work that's now nearly complete and the traffic mitigation efforts that we have and will continue to implement through our Reconnect West Seattle framework. Above all, I want to thank my team at SDOT. From the courage and leadership that Matt Donahue showed in his recommendation to close the bridge in March, to Heather Marks's incredible success in building one of the fastest and most thoughtful responses to a city emergency many of us have or ever will see, to Greg Izzo for leading the implementation of our high-rise bridge stabilization work and our low bridge strengthening efforts, and so many more across the department throughout all skills and trades within our department. I'm humbled to work with such talented and dedicated people. SDOT stands ready to repair the West Seattle high-rise bridge. We have nearly completed phase 1 of this 2-part repair process, as our stabilization work will conclude in December. We're also moving forward at the mayor's direction with the early design work for an eventual replacement of the high-rise bridge. The mayor's decision to repair the West Seattle high-rise bridge continues work that has been happening on, under, and inside the bridge since March. Through these ongoing stabilization repairs, we are already months down this pathway. Not a moment has been lost to restore travel across the Duwamish for communities in and around West Seattle, as the mayor consulted our structural team at SDOT, members of the community task force, and our outside technical experts, as well as others, to arrive at the best path forward to safely restore this critical connection as soon as possible. We're ready to drive this repair forward and reconnect West Seattle by 2022. Repair of the West Seattle high-rise bridge is happening in 2 parts. The first part began early this year through our stabilization efforts, which we're expected to complete in December. The second part of the repair work is currently being designed by our consulting team at WSP, with implementation beginning in the spring of 2021. This portion of the repair design work could not have been done until now because it needs to be informed by the results of the phase 1 stabilization work. It's also contingent on continuing to observe how the bridge responds as we head into colder temperatures, particularly sub-freezing temperatures, and see how the stabilization work responds to those changes in climatic conditions. It will take partnership and courage at all levels of government to restore travel quickly and plan for an eventual replacement that leverages opportunities for improved connectivity. Though Mayor Durkin and SDOT are confident that repair is the right decision to most quickly reconnect this critical transportation link, the pathway remains a challenging engineering solution, and we need to approach it carefully and diligently to manage the very real risks that we still face. But I know that together we can continue on this path and on this timeline. Finally, as both a West Seattle resident and as the director of SDOT, I want to make very clear that this is not just another construction project. This is a human-centered emergency with profound impacts on equity, our families, on economic recovery. Though it's the fastest path forward, repair still comes with a long-term emergency closure of the high-rise bridge that is disproportionately impacting communities of color in West Seattle and the Duwamish Valley as they absorb the vast majority of detour traffic in areas already facing higher levels of pollution, asthma, and environmental injustices. Our Reconnect West Seattle framework has already implemented many traffic improvements, with lots more slated for 2021, but any efforts on the bridge come with double focus and effort on the ground to keep our communities safe. With that, I will now turn it over to someone who has made much of the work possible and better, Paulina Lopez, co-chair of the West Seattle Bridge Community Task Force.
Thank you so much, Director Zimbabwe. Good morning, everyone. I'm really thankful for this morning to be here. I want to thank Mayor Durkant and SDOT leadership, of course, our community task force members for an incredible, dedicated, inclusive work on this challenging topic. We have learned so much through this process these past 5 months. Very dedicated meetings, just not the meetings on the task force, but behind the scenes, and quite frankly, sometimes complicated and very technical. We have said from the beginning that all impacted communities, particularly those in the Duwamish Valley, needed a seat at the table with a full menu so that we can come and don't be representing those voices. The impacts of the increased traffic and the additional air pollution of our communities, as you all know, are very real. And we feel that the leadership in the city have listened and understand that. And we really thank you for that. As we have agreed with my co-chair, former Mayor Nichols, the process brought us into a good decision that will limit the amount of time on the Duwamish Valley. And so the impact of the deterred traffic will avoid additional environmental and safety burdens. I'm very thankful for our community members that had the opportunity to give feedback and influence these decisions. All these big decisions always should be represented by community impacted. Reconnecting West Seattle and mitigating impacts during the prolonged closure, it's the real hard and necessary work, but we look forward to ensuring these efforts will continue to meet the needs of our communities most impacted. We, and I personally, will continue to advocate for healthy and fair mobility. Thank you for referencing climate. I think we need to continue prioritizing our future and our vision, reducing emissions and encouraging increasing capacity for modes of transportation. We need to keep on working together and towards an equitable recovery, giving priority to those who have been disproportionately impacted by environmental and racial injustices. Thank you so much for being with us through this, and I am going to pass it along to my co-chair, former Mayor Nichols.
Thank you, Paulina. We're at that point on the agenda where everything has been said, but not yet by everybody. So I will attempt to be brief, but always beware when a former elected official says that. We expect our mayors to make hard decisions. And I have some experience having sat in that chair. The decision to close the bridge on March 23rd, I think, was a gutsy decision by Mayor Durkan and the SDOT team. It shut down an incredibly important arterial connection, but it did so in the pursuit of protecting the public, and public safety has to come first. So while we all in West Seattle and South Park and Georgetown are affected by that decision, we thank you for keeping our safety primary. The second challenge then was to do the due diligence, to look at the different options, sort them, find out what the community felt about those, and then make a decision. And while we as a community are split, probably close to 50-50 along repair versus replacement, I always found that people were more than willing to give a mayor the room to make a hard decision when they believed that it was made in the pursuit of common good. And I think, Mayor Durkan, you have demonstrated that through your very thoughtful comments this morning and the process that you have gone through to listen to the community and listen to technical experts in making this decision today. So I want to thank you. I want to thank your SDOT team, who we've had a wonderful relationship with, not always smooth and happy, but at the end of the day, we came to agreement around the things that needed to be done to make our advice meaningful to you, and also to try and make this as possible for people to live through as we can. There's a lot more work to do. In fact, the task force is meeting this afternoon to review the decision that's been made and what effects it's going to have. And we need to continue to focus on the fact that people who are required to use this corridor during peak hours are going to be extraordinarily impacted for 2 years. And that's a long time, and it's going to seem a lot longer when you're sitting in that traffic. So we will continue to work with you, Mayor Durkin, and your team at SDOT to try and make this as smooth a process as possible and make this a very successful decision. So thank you all. And the task force, we expect to see you sharply at 2 o'clock this afternoon. With that, I believe our next speaker is Barbara Moffett. We on the task force really benefited from the technical expertise that they were very generously willing to share with us. And I think our advice was much better because of that. Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you. And good morning. On behalf of the entire 8-member Technical Advisory Panel, or TAP, we would like to thank Mayor Durkin, the City of Seattle, and in particular SDOT for having had the opportunity to walk alongside and provide outside independent technical input during this process. We know the mayor's decision considered many varying factors, including input by the TAP. It was important to understand the behavior of the bridge before making a determination as to the feasibility of repair. The forensic data provided by SDOT allowed WSP to perform the analyses that confirmed this understanding, and we applaud the approach taken by SDOT for immediate stabilization measures, which will feed into the upcoming repair methodologies. In summary, the TAP unanimously supports the mayor's decision for the quickest, least expensive option to restore connectivity to West Seattle. As with all technical solutions, there remain questions, and SDOT will continue to monitor the bridge and repairs as they plan for the future. We are pleased to provide technical guidance on this challenging issue. We are also heartened to hear that the city plans to continue efforts toward a type, size, and location study that will be required for a future bridge replacement at some point. It is prudent to undertake those efforts now to be poised and ready for the future, and the TAP is grateful to have been involved in helping lead to today's decision. And with that, I will pass it off to Laura Radford, who is the director of the West Seattle Junction Association. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, it looks like I'm the closer for this meeting, so that's exciting. I want to thank the mayor and all of the fellow citizens in West Seattle. This has been a long process, but very well needed, and I'm in support of repairing the bridge. You know, if you think about it, we hold the lives of thousands of people in our hands when we were making this decision. And I know that some people were frustrated with the length of the decision. But if you consider this, there's thousands of people, hundreds of feet up in the air every day. And those people are thinking about what to make for dinner or reminder to make that critical dentist appointment. And so the decision to close the bridge and to take this time to thoughtfully make the decision whether to repair or replace was really important. In fact, I think I would have been more worried if the decision had been made too quickly. So anyway, I want to give a message to my fellow West Seattleites. Thank you for your patience while we made this decision. Please remember to support small business. In the next couple of years, we're going to need you more than ever. And to the greater Seattle folks that are listening today, don't forget about West Seattle. pack a picnic, turn your GPS on, and come over and visit us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laura, for those very thoughtful words. So we are now at the end of our formal remarks from folks and can transition into Q&A. So just a reminder for everybody who's in the attendees portion of this morning's press conference to please use the digital hand raising function if you would like to ask a question for any of our panelists. To the extent possible, if you have a specific question for a specific person, please direct it to them in your asking of it. And for those who are unable to come off mute, you're welcome to use the chat function and I will read it out loud. However, for everyone watching at home, it would be greatly appreciated if you could articulate your questions yourselves, since not everyone can see the chat. And then finally, for folks who are watching on YouTube from home, we will be ensuring as much access to today's conversation as possible through a complete multi-language translation of today's remarks in the Q&A portion. And there is also, for those watching on Zoom, a live Spanish language translation going on. So with that, the first hand raised appropriately is Tracy Record from the West Seattle blog. So Tracy, can you please take yourself off of mute and ask your question?
Okay, I'm not getting the, okay, I'm unmuted, great.
We can hear you.
Okay, great. Here's my question. I just wanted some clarification on what happens between the completion of the stabilization work and the start of repairs. Already our readers are asking why the actual construction of the repairs, as said in the pre-announcement briefing, wouldn't start until fall.
I'm going to let Sam start with answering that.
Sure. So that's a great question, Tracy. As I mentioned, we can't finalize the design until we had completed the stabilization work and see how the bridge responds. Once we are in, once we can complete the design, then we'll be able to bring on the contractors necessary. We're doing everything we can to accelerate those processes and look for ways to do concurrent work as much as possible to see what we can do on those timelines. But we also need to be diligent and careful as we undertake these still challenging repairs. We don't want to skip any steps that would lead us down a faulty path.
Sam, could I also add on, this is Barbara Moffett, and the second phase, the repairs, is actually supplementary to the stabilization measures. So as the stabilization measures are in place and we're looking and monitoring and ensuring that there's the correct response, that the analysis correlates with, say, the temperature differentials, that information is supplementary to the design of the repairs. So they go together. You don't just do one and then do the other independently. So they do tie together, and it's important to have that understanding and the analysis behind what those repairs are going to be.
And I might just put that in lay person's terms, because I pushed on this a lot. What they're saying is everything we're doing right now is repair. We are repairing the bridge by stabilizing the bridge. We need to get through the last thermal cycle to know what the final part of that repair looks like and design it accordingly. And so, Tracy, the important point is we are already through part of the repair because the stabilization work was done with that in mind.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Tracy. Next, we're going to go, and I'm just going to read in order here so we can all be poised and efficient. We're going to go to Steve Kiggins, then we're going to go to Natalie Graham, Heidi Groover, and Erica Barnett, and I'll also put that in the chat. So over to you, Steve.
Hey, thanks for taking my question. I do appreciate your time. Just a quick clarification. Mayor Durkin mentioned a potential lifespan of 15 to 40, and I forget the subsequent speaker mentioned potential of 30 to 40. And if you could just clarify that and also explain maybe why that lifespan seems to be so short.
Well, let me see if I can take that.
Thanks.
This is Sam Zimbabwe again. The the bridge was originally designed with a 75-year design life. And we think that by executing the repairs successfully, we can still achieve that full design life of that 40 years. There's a little bit of uncertainty, and nobody can fully accurately predict the future. But we think that by repairing the problems that we have seen and the challenges that presented themselves, that we can still achieve the design life. The bottom bound of that of about 15 years is that if we didn't have confidence that the repairs would last at least 15 years, it wouldn't make sense, wouldn't be prudent to undertake them. I will again say that there's some uncertainty, and we don't have full clarity of what the future will bring in terms of the life of the bridge, but that is where the bounding right now comes. As we go into the repair design, we will also be looking a bit more at all of the components of the bridge and understanding what might be needed as the bridge continues to age to make sure we achieve the fullest design life possible.
Cheers, thanks.
Thank you, Steve. I just want to quickly note that our council members, Herbold and Peterson, they're in the midst of a budget hearing right now. So if there are questions specifically for our council members, if you want to indicate that in the chat, we can try and ensure a chance to connect before they have to head in that direction. But for now, we're going to turn it over to Natalie Graham.
Hi. Okay, so my question is probably for Director Zimbabwe and Mayor Durkin. Could you discuss the plan and goals for the future mixed-use crossing? Like, when could that be built, and what various challenges a project like that faces?
So, Sound Transit is currently in the process of doing environmental work on the West Seattle to Ballard link extension. They're in the midst of an environmental impact statement process. And I think the discussion is about how a future connection of the Duwamish, sort of what the design of that would look like as Sound Transit prepares for a light rail connection. So there's a lot of questions still to be answered around that, but we're in the midst of that environmental process in partnership with Sound Transit.
Okay, thanks. And would that have pedestrian use and bike access, or is it still too early to say on that front?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit too early to be able to say anything about that at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We're now going to go to Heidi Groover, followed by Erica Barnett, and then Mike Lindbloom.
Hi, my question is for the mayor. Do you, just on the funding issue, do you anticipate needing any federal money for the repairs, or will the city be able to entirely fund the work that you anticipate? And then also, do you believe that the new $20 car tab fee the council looks ready to approve should be spent on bridge maintenance?
So I think on the first question, I think Councilmember Herbold laid out the funding that we would already have accessible to us. But I'm going to look to the federal government and the state to see if we can augment this, because this corridor is not just important to the city of Seattle, it's important to the state and our whole region. Particularly if you look at the port, the number of jobs and freight that goes through there benefits Hawaii, Alaska, Idaho, Oregon. So I expect that we will look for that funding. We're prepared to move forward even if we don't get it, which makes the big difference between this and replacement. We could not do the replacement scenario without significant federal funding, and we would have to lock it down early next year, and that seemed unrealistic in the timetable. On the $20 VLF, I'll wait to see what council does, but look, we've got a combination of funding to look at holistically. We have, if they pass that car tab, it will be a reduction in the car tabs. I just really want to emphasize that people understand is it'll be reduction in what Seattle residents have today. And it's important for them to know that. We also know that we have the reserve we built up in case of the lawsuit by Mr. Iman. and we have STDB. So we're going to look at all that funding together, and I think holistically want to improve transit, infrastructure, and the like. And I think that's where the conversation needs to be.
So do you have a preferred source of more money for bridge maintenance?
I think we have to look holistically at all that funding and get the community input, stakeholder input to see holistically how we do that to fund both infrastructure, but also our transit needs and our other mobility needs.
Thank you, Heidi. Erica, I saw that your hand was raised at one point and is now down, so I just want to make sure it's intentionally down and not a digital accident. And not hearing one way or the other and having to come back if not. Oh, sorry.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Hello. Yeah, some of the questions I have were answered, but I do want to just elaborate on this Sound Transit question. Mayor Durkin, have you discussed this with the Sound Transit Board, the idea of doing a multimodal bridge? I am not aware of that being in their current plans, or was that sort of an idea that you were tossing out yesterday and today?
It's not in their current plans. We know that as Sam said, we're in the midst of environmental review. But as soon as the West Seattle Bridge was taken out of commission, I had some conversations with Sound Transit and said we needed to be consulting each other. I think it's clear now, looking to the future, we have to start that conversation. Obviously, we're bounded by what the voters passed, as well as the timetables. I think it's critical that we not slow down a connectivity of light rail to West Seattle. It's going to be very, very important to get that. I was living here when we missed our ability to get those kinds of systems the first time, and we want to make sure we do that. At the same time, the public is paying for that bridge, and we know that looking into the future that we're going to have additional mobility needs, particularly if we want to get people out of their cars. And so this bridge is not going to be constructed or begin until about 7 years from now. I think the public would expect us to have a conversation to see if we can have a bridge that does more than one thing and how we might partner together to get the best bridge for the region.
Thank you so much, Mayor. Thank you, Erica. We're now going to go to Mike Lindbloom. And after Mike, Graham, I know that you had your hand raised at one point and don't see it up now, but just highlighting that if you did intend to have your hand so raised, you'll be following Mike. So Mike, over to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you hear me? Hello?
We can hear you. Yep.
Okay, yeah. My question is directed mainly toward Barbara Moffett on behalf of the TAP. The cost-benefit analysis predicts that they would need 6 months for engineering and about 12, 13 months for construction work to do a lasting repair job. I've heard a lot of pushback that it should be achievable much quicker than that. Do you believe SDOT can save significant time? And how do you size up this project in difficulty, complexity to other post-tension bridge repairs that you know about around the country?
Thank you for the questions. To speak first to timeline, the timelines in the CBA were realistically conservative, if I may say that, and a lot of the timeline does depend on methodology of delivery. So if we go with something called a design bid build, which is often standard for a bridge or repair, replacement, anything like that, that has a longer time frame. So we were trying to bound on the outer side in the CBA what that time frame could be. My understanding is that there are other methodologies. GCCEM is a very favored methodology that does reduce time frame by allowing the contractor to be involved during the design phase to help advance that along the way. And so I think that by using an alternate delivery methodology, we'll be able to get it advanced and open potentially sooner. There's possibility for having a partial opening where you can have some lanes opening while the repairs are going on. So there's a lot of things to consider and to discover as part of that, but the design has to be done and then it gets delivered. So would I like to see it done quicker? Yes. Do I believe it's possible? Yes. But there's a lot of factors to be considered as well. As Sam mentioned, they're also going to be taking a look at all other components to ensure that what is being repaired is comprehensive. And so that is one answer to your question. The other question you were asking about the complexity of this with respect to other repairs around the country and within my knowledge. And this is an eminently doable repair scenario. This is something that I believe very strongly, and I'm just one member of the TAP, all of us are unanimous that this can be repaired and it is feasible to do so. Complex, not necessarily. I would like to point out that back in the original design documents, there was a provision made for future post-tensioning being added on the inside of the box. And that is along the lines of what this repair will do. So it was something that was considered back in the day, was not needed nor required. And so it is going along with what a standard methodology would be for a repair. And I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, pretty well. And yeah, and you mentioned GCCM. That would or could Kramer be just kept on?
Let me jump in there because I think
I
I
don't
want Barbara to get out of her lane a little bit here.
That's a big X for me.
Yeah. So I think these are good questions, Mike. I think we've tried to present realistic timeframes throughout this process, and as we've said, we have met the timeframes for every milestone of this project as we've laid them out. And this is an urgent challenge that we are doing everything we can to do as quickly as possible. I will also note that the stabilization work that has happened required the bridge to be closed. We have opened up the deck of the bridge to allow access for the larger equipment, and we had to take traffic off to hang the work platforms from the bridge. We'll, as we go forward, we'll likely be able to take some folks up on the bridge and be able to walk through and show what has been done. And you'll be able to understand that there's no way that we could have done the work that has been done now, even if it were structurally sound, with traffic on the bridge. We don't know yet, and as Barbara said, we don't know exactly what methods will be needed. So it's way too preliminary to say whether there's any opportunity to restore traffic before we complete the full repairs of the bridge. So we are looking at every possible avenue to do this as quickly as possible, while also making sure that we do it with the diligence and the care that we are successful and get the full life out of the bridge.
All right, thanks.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Mike. I am now going to turn it over to Graham Johnson. And Kara, you also did have your hand up previously, and just flagging it. If you did intend to ask a question, you'll be following Graham. And we're going to be pretty close to time after that. So over to you, Graham. I'm not sure if you're able to come off of mute. Okay, perhaps not. Kara, did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, I do. Thank you. My question had been answered, but I just wanted to follow up on something Barbara just shared. When realistically could we see a partial opening?
Kara, it's way too soon to say, and I'll just be really clear about this. We're not opening the bridge to traffic until it is safe to do so. And we do not, we'll have to complete the design of the repairs that are still needed. We have a conceptual, as Barbara said, it's not Herculean, but it's more complicated than paving a road, let's say, right? It's not unprecedented, it's not non-standard, but there's a lot of care and diligence that we'll have to take, and we'll have to make sure that we can do that successfully. As we know more about that and the construction methods that we'll need to undertake to do that work and how the bridge continues to respond, we'll be able to answer some of those questions going forward. But at this point, we don't anticipate that we can open the bridge to traffic prior to the completion of the repairs.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Kara. And thank you to Mayor Durkin. We are at time. I want to thank everybody for being here. Before we close, I'm going to turn it over to the mayor for one last chance to make some remarks, and then we're going to close out. So thank you, everyone. Mayor Durkin, over to you.
Thank you, Michael. And again, thanks to everybody who's on this call and everybody who gave input. I just want to stress a couple things that I think you heard here is, while getting mobility back in that corridor is critical and was one of the important factors we weighed, it could not be weighed in isolation. And I think that's why you heard Sam and others speak so strongly about the necessity to consider both safety and certainty and the impacts on the community. And we have seen, as Sam mentioned, this has disproportionately impacted some of our communities of color, particularly in South Park and other areas. And so as we proceed, we want to continue to mitigate against those impacts. We will move as rapidly as possible, but we cannot sacrifice safety and certainty for speed alone. And so I'm very grateful for all the work that we've done. Really, what we've done in the last 7 months has progressed at a pace that no project I've ever seen in the city of Seattle has been able to do, on multiple paths, ensuring the safety for the community as well as advancing this very important road project. I also want to say that we are moving forward knowing that while as we heard, it is the unanimous advice from the technical advisors that the repair option should last for that period of time. We've all just gone through most of 2020. And none of what we've experienced in 2020 was predicted by anybody. In fact, some of you may recall that at the turn of the new year, there was one of the publications did a, what does the future hold for Mayor Durkin? And they had people, that had astrologists and palm readers. I can tell you a pandemic, an economic crisis, a racial reckoning, the failure of a bridge, the failure of the pier were not in any of those predictions. And so I think that you are hearing us be even more cautious. We're telling you that there are risks that exist, and we're going to mitigate for those risks. That's why we're going to plan today to start thinking about how we repair that bridge in the future, because we know we have to. It's why we talk about joining with Sound Transit and seeing if we can partner on things in the future. Because what we do today is not just for today. Every decision we make is to put our city and our region and the people and businesses of Seattle in a better position looking to the future, where we come out of COVID better as a city, more equitable, and moving closer to our climate goals. And so there is no guarantees, but I am very, very thankful for all the expertise we've gotten, both from our outside advisors and from the Seattle Department of Transportation, and the great input we've gotten from the people you've heard here today, as well as the task force on this very important structure. So I want to end with one last thing. We are in the middle of a pandemic that is getting worse in the city of Seattle. And anybody watching this, please do not gather with people at Thanksgiving. We've seen a rush on our testing sites for people who are getting tested so they can gather. This is not the time to do that. We need to double our efforts to make sure that we get this virus under control. So please don't gather, wash your hands, wear your mask. We know it's hard. We know this has had incredible impacts on every business and every resident of the city of Seattle, but we're at a critical and perilous time. So I want to thank everyone for all they've done on the West Seattle Bridge. And as we move forward, we will continue to have the same level of transparency so the public knows exactly where we are, what we're doing, and what we're seeing. Thank you, everybody. Take care.